All right. Good morning or good afternoon. This is the second half of the lecture on blood and the formed elements. So hopefully you remember that the formed elements are going to be everything other than the plasma. So when we look at the blood, we know that there is plasma and formed elements, and I've already talked about the red blood cells. So now I'm going to focus on the white blood cells, and the white blood cells are going to be part of your immune system, okay? And I need you to remember that we calculate this in cubic millimeters. So please remember, if I were to take a cubic millimeter square, okay, cubic, making a cube, right? If I were to trim one of your fingernails and cut it into a perfect cube, that would be about a cubic millimeter. Very, very small amount of blood. So the ratio for white blood cells to red blood cells is 1,000 to 1. So for every 1,000 red blood cells you have, every 1,000 red blood cells you have, you're going to have one white blood cell, okay? So blood cells, the white blood cells are way less in number. You have between 5,000 to 9,000 white blood cells in that same cubic millimeter, okay? White blood cells can do something that red blood cells cannot. White blood cells can squeeze out of the walls of the capillaries in order to get into the surrounding tissue. And we call this diapedesis. So the white blood cells, being your immune system cells, have to be able to move throughout the tissue and be able to heal or kill anything that is in your body that is making you sick, okay? Now, when we start looking at white blood cells, they get kind of confusing. You know, if I look at these two cats right here, I think you guys can see and figure out which one is the house cat and which one is a tiger, okay? So apples, I put those up because apples come in such a variety and a different, look and appearance these days. You know, if you're eating a Granny Smith apple, well, that's a green apple. If you're eating a Honeycrisp apple, well, there's some yellow on a Honeycrisp apple. If you're eating a red Delicious apple, all of these apples have different looks, okay? And we are familiar with apples, we are familiar with cats, and we are kind of familiar with leaves that we can look and we can notice differences, but there's also things that make them similar, okay? So if we look at all of these cats, again, it's pretty easy to pick out which one is the house cat, all right? It's pretty easy to see which one is the tiger. It's pretty easy to see which two are lynxes, okay? So, lynxes have the characteristic of this tuft on the top of their ears, and sure enough, we don't see that on the house cat. We don't see that, well, we can't see that on the house cat, but we don't see those on house cats or on tigers, okay? So use that same idea when we start looking at these white blood cells, because it does get kind of confusing if you don't take the idea that you're going to have to look for the characteristics that make them different, okay? So we're going to have to look for the characteristics that make them different. Now, in doing that, I'm going to tell you that some of these cells have granules, like grains of sand or salt, right? Grains. They have grains. That's supposed to be an S. They have grains, okay? So sand comes in granules, salts comes in granules, and granulocytes have these granules, all right? So there's granules there. There are granules here, okay? And there are granules, which is the other one? Oh, the neutrophil. And there are granules here. Oh, top 3. Granulocytes. And then these down here do not have granules. D and E do not, which we call them agranulocytes. And we call them agranulocytes because A meaning does not have, okay? So there are 3 different types of granulocytes. Neutrophils are the first, and they are the most numerous. And you can see them here at the picture here at the bottom. They have these little lobes. Like if I zoom in here, you can see, oh, my blue is covering up that blue, okay? So you can see that they have these lobes, right? They're like little circles. And then they are connected, okay? And this is what helps this blood cell carry out its job, okay? And what is its job? Its job is to eat things, okay? Phagocytosis is the biological process of engulfing something, and neutrophils love to eat bacteria. So if you have bacteria growing in your body, a signal is produced by your immune system, and it tells your body to make neutrophils. And hopefully you remember that all of your blood cells are made in the red marrow of your bones. They are made by those stem cells. And when stimulated by certain chemicals, that process of making cells will go to making whatever cells are needed, okay? So once your body starts making these cells only last for about 12 hours. Or in that 12 hours, they might consume about 24 bacteria. And if they do consume that 24 bacteria, they then are marked as waste, and your body will process them out as waste. Okay, so neutrophils are the most mobile. They're first to arrive on scene. There's a little video I will show you of neutrophils eating bacteria. It's kind of crazy to watch it. But super, super cool. Again, I will show that to you, okay? And then here are our agranulocytes. Oh, wow, I just skipped all of these other guys. I'm sorry, let me go back. So I got way ahead of myself. I got distracted. Eosinophils are another type of white blood cell that's going to be produced in that bone marrow. An eosinophil will be produced if there are parasites present. Okay, they also are there to reduce inflammation. If there is a high count in the blood sample that a physician were to take, they would then look for a parasitic infection, or they might determine that it's allergies. Okay, so allergies definitely can cause a production of eosinophils, and that would rule out the parasitic worms, but that gives a doctor a narrower window of things to look for as possible, illness or something wrong. The last granulocyte is known as the basophil. It is considered very rare, and this is something that prevents clots in our blood. We do not want clots in our blood. So if there are clots in our blood, that would be bad. Heparin is a chemical that is going to be made by the basophils in order to prevent blood clots, because it also is going to cause inflammation. It's going to cause swelling. And when there is inflammation, you have more of a chance to have a blood clot. So your body is actually causing inflammation, which is how your body is going to repair itself. It causes a mass amounts of blood flow to the area, making it inflamed. And then there's going to be heparin there, which is going to prevent your blood from clotting, which you don't want your blood to clot unless you're bleeding, okay? So those are our granulocytes. There's 3 of them. They are the ones here at the top: the neutrophil, the eosinophil, and the basophil, okay? And then we have the 2 at the bottom, which are going to be our agranulocytes. These are monocytes and lymphocytes. You guys might have heard of lymphocytes before. That's commonly something we've heard of. So monocytes are, again, another type of phagocytic cell that they are going to consume bacteria. They are going to get rid of dead cells, and they're also going to pick up any debris that might be within the tissue and discard it, okay? Move it out of your system. Now, your lymphocytes are the very specialized ones, and the ones that we activate with vaccination. B cells and T cells, these are things that are the memory cells in our immune system. This is where we are going to fight viruses. You also are going to be able to create an allergic reaction, okay? So this is something we don't necessarily want. An allergy is considered to be a negative response to something that you should not have a response to, okay? Also, lymphocytes are going to be what would cause problems with transplants. If you receive a transplant of a kidney, lungs, a heart, you have to take medication for the rest of your life so that way your lymphocytes do not reject your transplant, okay? And then also lymphocytes are responsible for noticing, finding, and getting rid of cancer in our body. Very, very important. Okay, so those are our white blood cells. Again, there's granulocytes and agranulocytes, and you are going to be asked questions about what all of these things do. So you do need to write this down in your notes. Okay, the last thing we find as our formed elements in our body are going to be those platelets. That is the last thing that you're going to record here. And platelets are actually parts of cells. Okay, so there's these megakaryocytes that are part of the process here where your blood cells are being made. It's still on this flow chart of development from the same type of stem cell. Okay, and those platelets, you're going to have between 250,000 to 500,000 per that same cubic millimeter. Remember that little cube, 1 millimeter on each side, almost like a fingernail that was cut into a cube. It's going to have 250,000 to 500,000 platelets, and these are essential for blood clotting. I'm going to talk more about blood clotting when I talk about the functions of plasma. So you only need to know that these thrombocytes are going to be part of that process. And again, they come from that cell, that stem cell that we find in the red marrow, the bone marrow. Okay, so hopefully at this point you're familiar with the 7 items that are made with the formed elements. We've talked now about the white blood cells and basics of what they do. You now understand that there's platelets in there, even though you don't really understand what they do yet. And your red blood cells, hopefully you understand what they do as well. Don't forget, you need to remember that the red blood cell is basically foundational in hemoglobin. And inside that middle hemoglobin, inside the middle of the hemoglobin molecule is that iron molecule, and why iron is so important to us. Okay, we will discuss the blood plasma in our next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.